Hey everyone, as mentioned in our live classroom session, I want to share just a little bit more detailed review of the cardiac cycle. Now that you've learned basic heart anatomy, we need to learn about heart physiology. What happens as that heart beats? So some basic terminology that you need to be aware of so that you really understand this process are these two bolded terms at the top of the slide. When we talk about the heart, this term systole means contraction. We know that the heart has 4 chambers. Each of them is made primarily of that cardiac muscle, that myocardium layer. And when the myocardium contracts, it causes that pumping action. So systole is really important to the heart's function. Diastole is the opposite. It's the relaxation of that chamber. So it's already contracted. When it relaxes again, we call that diastole. Now, as I mentioned, this third bullet point down, systole or contraction of each individual heart chamber causes blood to be pumped out of that chamber. Important, right? That is literally the job of our heart, is to pump blood both out to the lungs in that pulmonary circuit, so our all-important red blood cells can go to the lungs and become reoxygenated. And the heart also pumps blood out to the body, that reoxygenated blood coming from the left side of the heart in the systemic circuit. And this combination of systole or contraction followed by diastole or relaxation is what allows the heart to do its job. We'll expand on this a little bit next week when we talk about blood pressure. I just want to introduce that. We will learn more about it next week. So when we talk about the cardiac cycle, what that term means is everything that happens in the heart in one beat. Okay, so if you're thinking about your heartbeat, we know that that heartbeat is the lub-dub, right? All of that is one heartbeat. So this process, the cardiac cycle, starts with contraction in the atria. Now, when we use this term systole, we can talk about systole in the atria, or those upper chambers of the heart, and we can talk about systole in the ventricles, which are the lower chambers of the heart. Systole in these two different chambers has a very different action. Okay, so the cardiac cycle, up to that first dashed point, the cardiac cycle starts with contraction of the atria, okay, and ends with relaxation of those ventricles. So in that time, the atria contract and relax. So we have atrial systole and diastole. And then we have ventricular systole and diastole, contraction and relaxation. So what happens during atrial systole? Well, those atria are contracting. They are forcing blood from those upper atria down into the ventricles. And as that happens, those AV or atrioventricular valves, those valves that are located between the atria and the ventricles, those valves are open. As soon as atrial systole is complete, meaning all the blood that is going to leave the atria leaves the atria and enters the ventricles, now we kick off ventricular systole. Those ventricles start to contract. Now, as that happens, 2 key movements happen in the valves. As the ventricles contract, remember, blood flow through the heart should only flow one direction. So ventricular systole begins, those ventricles are contracting, and as that happens, the AV valves close. Okay, we don't want blood to go back up into the atria, so those valves, those AV valves are tricuspid and mitral, they close to prevent backflow of blood. At the very same time, those semilunar valves open. So the pulmonary and aortic valves open so that blood can leave the ventricles as it is designed to do. Now, as the ventricles are contracting, the atria are relaxing, they're opening up, and they are filling so that this whole cycle can start again. The last step in this process of the cardiac cycle is our ventricles now have to relax. They've pumped out all of the blood they are going to pump out. What happens is they start to open, the semilunar valves, that pulmonary and aortic valve, close so that blood doesn't flow back into the ventricles. Okay. And now those AV valves open again so that blood can automatically begin flowing through those AV valves from the atria to the ventricles. So, quick summary again. Atria contract, that causes the AV valves to open, and blood is actively being pumped from the atria down to the ventricles. Once the atria are done contracting, the ventricles begin to contract. This is when we have that ventricular systole. As those ventricles start to contract, our AV valves slam shut. That's the lub of our lub-dub heart sounds. Okay, the ventricles are contracting, blood is flowing out of both ventricles into the pulmonary artery and aorta. So those semilunar valves are open, allowing blood to leave the ventricles. And as the ventricles are contracting, the atria are relaxing. So we have atrial systole happening at this, or excuse me, atrial diastole happening at the same time as ventricular systole. Last but not least, the ventricles relax, those aortic and pulmonary semilunar valves close, and AV valves open again, allowing passive flow between those two, or between those four chambers. I'll talk about this more in my other video. This chart is incredibly important to understand. Okay, so what I want you to look at for right now in this chart is just the green shaded portions. Don't worry about what's in white. That green shaded portion, start at the top. This is showing you one cardiac cycle. So at the start, where it says start, you can see the atria are contracting. Okay, atrial systole. You can visually see that they're a little bit compressed. So you can see those black arrows, blood is flowing through the AV valves. Go into that next darker green shaded part on the right of the image, and you can see that right now we have ventricular systole. Okay, meaning those ventricles are contracting, blood is being actively pumped out of the ventricles into the pulmonary arteries and the aorta. You can visually see in that darker green shaded image, the ventricles are smaller, indicated by that red arrow showing you the pumping action. Now let's go into that last light green portion on the bottom center and left. Now we have ventricular diastole. Those ventricles are opening, blood is flowing first passively and then actively from the atria into the ventricles. This is the cardiac cycle. The next video will walk you through how the actions of what's happening in this cardiac cycle is tied to the EKG that you see in the white portion of this image. Please reach out with any questions. Thanks.